Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. This is a very unusual and exciting program for me. I'm talking about the launch of a feature film documentary about the life of Ted Owens, the PK man, the fellow about whom I wrote a book over 20 years ago called The PK Man, a true story of mind over matter. And so, without further ado, here is a first look at a teaser for our documentary in progress on the life of Ted Owens, PK Man.
Battle of the Psychics. The October 22nd, 1972 edition of the National Tatler.
Ted Owens, he claims he can control all those things, but he can't control his mouth too well.
Fella. A friend of mine in Chicago saw an article today in which you say some nasty things about me in the Tatler. You even have the gall to insinuate, as he explained it long distance, that I might be a fake and a phony. So you can make some predictions. Big deal. I can make predictions that come true. And mind you, we are speaking of documented before-the-fact action.
I was working at my window about a week ago when Ted Owens, who calls himself PK Man, came to my window. Mr. Ramos, he said, my special ESP ability and powerful mind have picked up the thoughts of some bad people who are planning to bomb a post office here in Norfolk. They plan to bomb it on Saturday or Sunday. Last Saturday, a bomb was thrown at the post office building, and the FBI have entered the case. I swear that this is a true and accurate statement.
So there can be no argument.
Ted Owens. A World War II veteran of the Pacific Theater who fell over a rail and spontaneously levitated, yes, you heard that right, reached out for help to pioneering parapsychologist J.B. Rhine at Duke University, where he became his research assistant. At various points in his life, a bullwhip artist, a carnival knife thrower, judo master, genius member of Mensa, executive oil dowser, professional typist, summoner of UFOs, and self-professed master of mind over matter that could control nature itself by the force of psychokinesis, or PK. And he would be the greatest teller of tall tales in history, if not for the evidence.
168 different demonstrations he performed over a period of 20 years. 2/3 of them worked out the way he said they would, for events that by chance alone you wouldn't expect, like a volcano.
So I can control exploding volcanoes, control the weather.
Large-scale psychokinetic events, rain and snow and so on.
And the only snowstorm that I can recall ever happening is the one that was sent to us by Ted Owens.
Also control military forces. Heal people given up by doctors for dead. Control radar installations. Control pro football and basketball teams. And on and on. And so why do you dare football players to come to Cape Charles and punch me in the nose?
If he insists on taking credit for causing injuries, he should be jailed for assault with a deadly weapon.
Less than half the Eagles players could not return at all. All the young linebackers were injured.
And also predicted he could make some UFOs appear. Even that happened, published in the newspapers.
He creates what he calls a picture, a PK map, an image of what he wants to have happen. He focuses on that image. He sends the image telepathically to invisible aliens hovering above the earth in a giant UFO he calls the space intelligences. They sit in front of a big screen and they make all of these things happen.
Mime is perhaps the greatest story in the entire history of the world. UFO entities have given me an advanced brain, the brain of future men. Now they want to see what I will do with it, and whether I will misuse my powers. So far, I have not.
He called himself the PK Man.
Lightning is my specialty.
I'm particularly excited to bring on board for this project the filmmaker Lance Mungia. Welcome, Lance.
Hey, Jeffrey, thank you so much for having me on the show. And I'm really excited about this project. And we've been talking about it a long time. So it's an honor for me to be here and tell the world about what we're doing.
Well, let's begin by talking a little bit about your background. I know I first met you many years ago when you were working with Russell Targ on a wonderful feature documentary, a very successful one, called Third Eye Spies.
If you had an ability to be able to remotely perceive stuff any place in the world, that could be an extraordinary intelligence source.
We found that many individuals are able to accurately describe what's going on in distant locations.
Are you saying that the work you've been doing is classified?
It was a research facility. That was all that we were going to tell them.
The Russians have been spending millions of dollars investigating so-called ESP.
Psychic spies. Almost a psychic arms race here. Is there any real application to this?
I think remote viewing has been demonstrated over the 20 years of work that's been sponsored by the government.
Producing crucial and vital intelligence to the NSA, CIA, DEA, and the Secret Service.
I began to feel frightened.
The KGB did it, man.
What's really going on here? State-sponsored assassination attempt.
The CIA was lying.
They wanted to kill the program.
A storm brewing.
This is real.
I say no more secrets.
Let this information out.
One of the reasons I've been eager to work with you on this project is because, unlike almost every other filmmaker I've ever encountered, you have a sensitivity for this extraordinary subject matter.
I'm honored to be involved and to have you say that about me because, it's humbling, coming from somebody who's been doing this as long as you have. And I've always been interested in the PK Man. I remember the first time that we actually met was when I was shooting Third Eye Spies. You started telling the story of PK Man, and it was so amazing, and yet at the same time so unbelievable. The story of Ted Owens that could change the weather and could do all of these psychokinetic things and cause UFOs to appear. And then you said, oh, and by the way, I've got hours of Ted's audio, but you have to take it very seriously because it could really change your whole worldview and how you see things. And I found that so fascinating.
Well, I think it's important to let our viewers understand that we're endeavoring to raise some funds to launch this project. You and I have already been working on it for a couple of years.
So we're going to do a crowdfunding page, and we'll put the link. Let's put the link down below, and then we'll have it flash through the rest of this video, or at least be a link that people can click on. And I am a small company. My company, Waking Universe Films, has produced several UFO documentaries, plus Third Eye Spies, and over the last few years. And we're very independent. The evolving technologies that exist out there in the world have allowed us to be even more independent and bigger in scale than we could have imagined even 5 years ago. So with this PK Man movie, there's a lot of historical research that still needs to be done. We need to be going to news archives and possibly purchasing news clips and things like that we can't get anywhere else. This is something that we need to really raise some money for too, because there's a lot of material. That material has to be professionally cleaned up and mixed because a lot of the audio is older. We want to interview some of the contemporary researchers that are working today that demonstrate how what Owens was talking about in the 1970s has since been scientifically documented in a lab. People like Dean Radin, animated reenactments of Owens's life, based around his audio, based around eyewitness testimony for things that occurred in his life. And we want to show that in a animated style that is cinematic. And so we make this documentary a truly cinematic production that will belie its beginnings and how we actually are making this. And that's possible now because through my company, we have been doing animated reenactments now since the pandemic for television, for other documentaries, and producing really top quality reenactments for these documentaries that are on par with anything you would find at a major studio because the technology has come so far. And I'm not even talking about AI in the more recent stuff, using tools like Unreal Engine and motion capture tools, things that we've really kind of set up our studio to do, as you can see in the reel, which is some of these films. And that really is the core of this, is that the project itself has a production quality, a top-notch documentary I think will compete with any other paranormal documentary that's ever been made. And beyond that paranormal aspect, the story aspect of Owens's life is so compelling because he documented everything, and you have preserved all of these documents. So those are the types of things that we really need to raise funding for. But it was really when I showed up at your house and we started really going over the material, and you brought out these big boxes of archives. These archives are just decades of material about Owens, documenting the phenomenon that he claims to have caused, documenting witness testimonies, a lot of them notarized.
And the FBI have entered the case. I swear that this is a true and accurate statement.
Untold history, completely untold, that so blow my, it just begs to be shown to the world.
This is a project that I have been meaning to do since I first encountered Ted Owens in 1976. I worked with the man for 11 years until he died in 1987. And ever since then, I have felt that this is a story that needs to be told. It needs to be understood. In some ways, I feel that my career in parapsychology has been epitomized by this particular research.
I hadn't been able to stop thinking about it since that first event where we actually got together and you showed me just the raw documents in his own handwriting, which we can be showing here. Just so much great information and personality. Owens himself as a character. He is the ultimate anti-hero. It's like, what if you gave all the power of a god to a guy who you wouldn't trust to drive you down the street, but and who has these great grand plans and a way of speaking was so. There's such a dichotomy within his character, and yet he was also this brilliant soul that had so much passion for researching the subject. He was actually a very, very serious researcher.
And I have waited too long, over long, for some cooperation from somebody. Waiting for some scientists somewhere to make an approach.
And in communication with all of the top scientists in parapsychology of the day, including yourself and Russell and Hal Puthoff, who we've already interviewed for the film. As a filmmaker, I always find that it's not just the subject matter, it's the credibility behind it from the personalities involved. And also just it makes it entertaining to see such a colorful character.
He's larger than life, and yet at the same time, his talents, I think, are the embodiment of the potential that exists within everyone.
The UFO entities have given me an advanced brain, the brain of future men. Now they want to see what I will do with it.
This is something that I feel so simpatico with you about. The way we can look at as human beings, the possibilities of what we can possibly imagine, or even what we can't imagine. You know, could it be possible? Could it be real? If there's even a grain of truth within the Owens story, then the world, it's time to know about it. And I remember the very first interview we did, and I asked you off camera, you know, about PK Man, and I said, hey, would you be interested in doing something? And your response was, well, I wrote this book 20 years ago, but it's the world wasn't really ready for it. And now, through my own journey in doing Third Eye Spies, it changed my worldview completely, and it showed me what evidence it actually exists for the primacy of consciousness, and just how real the study of consciousness is in terms of really superhuman, supernatural characteristics that consciousness may have. And that's really worthy of a serious conversation. So we're not just talking about making a mythical film about a guy who claims to do some things. Evidence shows in other areas from other researchers that some of the things that he has talked about could be very real. And you've devoted your life to pursuing that, and I want to help you with that, and I want to help get that information out to the world.
Well, it's important, I think, that in addition to your background in parapsychology, having produced Third Eye Spies, you've also done several very important video documentaries concerned with UFOs, which is another aspect of the Ted Owens story.
Remote viewing to me was almost like a gateway drug into the paranormal and into the study of ufology. And I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of the people who have been on your show that are interested in the subject, like Jacques Vallée, several others. After Third Eye Spies, I went on and I produced The Phenomenon, which was a very successful UFO documentary directed by James Fox.
I knew this was breaking news for the front page of the New York Times.
We need to accept that we are not alone in the universe.
The federal government, all these years, has covered up everything. It's very, very bad for our country.
There have been visitation, crashed craft, material recovered.
It was not anything from this earth. All I could do is keep a mouth shut.
The public has
going
a right
through
to know.
70 years of history about the UFO subject and rewriting and figuring out the stories to tell and combing through interviews. They all speak to the same message, which is that there's a much larger human story, and that this planet that we exist upon, we're not only not separate from it, but we also risk destroying it in a way that has attracted attention outside of ourselves in some way. It's intriguing. And Owens was about all of that decades before anyone else was even talking about it. And now the whole concept of UFO summoning is very common, with the CE5 stuff, and with there's various people that claim to do it. Owens was making those claims successfully and causing witnesses to see things in the sky based on his predictions or psychokinetic ability, whatever, decades before anyone else. And so that's important. I also, by the way, have just finished producing The Program, which was James Fox's follow-up to The Phenomenon.
What is being done to verify the assertion that the U.S. government has spaceships of non-human intelligence in their possession?
That kind of revelation unearths people's beliefs.
I would go to jail to say things that I've been exposed to in the program.
We are living in the apex of timing when it comes to the world's understanding of what UFOs or now UAPs are really about. And they've been here a long time. People have reported them. And the government has been a lot more involved and interested than people tend to give them credit for. 2 congressional hearings, the first in 50 years, just over the last year. It's at a point where now we're not just interviewing witnesses, we're interviewing senators. We're interviewing a 37-year veteran of the Senate Armed Services Committee.
You're telling me people have come forward claiming firsthand knowledge of craft of non-human origin?
That's correct.
And intelligence committees,
we have
claims on camera that
not only that there have been crashes, but there have been crash retrievals.
Do we have the bodies of the pilots?
So a lot of what Owens was claiming back then that people were looking at him sideways for are now mainstream. And I think that we really are on the verge of some very big disclosures that are going to change the way, again, that a lot of people look at the world. You know, take, for example, the largest airplane disaster in American history at Kennedy Airport in the 70s.
Ted Owens is flying into Kennedy Airport, showing I'm the guy who could knock these airplanes out of the sky with psychokinesis. And he's bragging to the stewardesses when the plane right ahead of him is struck by lightning, which is part of his trademark, and crashed. Some of the most impressive incidents are the ones that happen by accident, and this crash was one such incident. He wasn't trying to hit the airplane ahead of him. He was bragging about an article that had appeared in Saga magazine that showed an airplane being struck by lightning from a previous demonstration he had done, which was also accidental. He was trying to, and did successfully produce strange visuals on a radar screen, which he claimed he could do. And then subsequently, airplanes were struck by lightning and downed in the Chesapeake Bay.
And in that was just one example of many of Owens either being intricately involved or at the very least being at the absolute wrong place at the right time. It very much like the anti-Forrest Gump, you know, who throughout this entire period of history from like the 60s through the 80s, he always tended to hit the nail on the head of the worst possible thing that could occur. You know, I mean, I keep thinking back to him trying to teach his young children how to do PK as they're overlooking Mount St. Helens. And he's trying to explain there's this grid pattern and you use it and this is how you create PK effects. And then in that moment, the volcano erupts and Mount St. Helens explodes, the largest eruption in, you know, modern history. And he's like, okay, everybody back into the car, you know. And it's not that he intended to do these things, but again and again, real effects. And so those things need to be taken seriously and looked at.
Well, macro psychokinesis, which is what we're talking about, is probably the most controversial subject within the field of parapsychology. Even experienced parapsychologists have a lot of hesitation to confront this level of phenomena. And I think the reason is because a mere 250 years ago, here in the United States, we were burning witches at the stake. The belief was, the paradigm of the time was that witchcraft is real and it's dangerous. And the paradigm shifted so that today, the major paradigm is that witchcraft doesn't exist, which is just as dangerous as believing that it does exist.
You're right. You're right. And we fear what we don't understand, right? And I think even greater than fear is our own ego's desire not to be fooled. We don't want to be fooled. We don't want to buy into something that is bullpucky. You know, we want to know that we are correct and that it's all logical and that it all makes sense. But what science, real cutting edge science, is showing us again and again is that it doesn't all make sense. And that there's things about the way that reality is constructed that we still don't understand. And yet we have this dogma The dogma was the big villain in Third Eye Spies. The first time I met Russell Targ, I asked him, who's the villain of the story? Who was it that was really holding your work back? And he said it was the dogma. It was the religious and the scientific prejudice against anything that people don't understand. And if this is all fake, then it's still a great story. But if it's real, if even a little bit real, then this is the most important story that we could be focused on right now, because it does show us the dangers and the opportunities of what's possible through the human condition. And we see that things like mass meditation can work. Mass prayer works. And I don't say that as a highly religious person. I say that by looking at scientific studies and statistics of people who have been healed by large groups of people who will pray or meditate for them. Like we know that consciousness has an effect in the world. And is it possible that Ted Owens somehow tapped into that in such a major way? And then what does that really say about us?
It's very intriguing, and I think it says a lot, not only about Ted Owens, who seems more than human, but it says a lot about each and every one of us.
What if our conscious intent really does have a vote in how things play out in this world? It really is that fundamental question of, are we helpless victims to our reality, or are we the creators of our reality? And do we have some sort of say and pull in how the events in the broader world unfold? And to me, and I don't know the answer, but I'm all about investigating it. And it feels like I would rather live in a world where magic is possible.
Well, for me, the lesson of the Ted Owens case is that the universe itself is alive, and each and every one of us is entangled with it, with each other, and with the universe in the quantum sense of entanglement. So we all have a measure of interaction and influence with the whole universe.
And what if that level of interaction with the universe is only dependent upon our ability to imagine it? What if the power of the mind is that infinite? It sounds far-fetched to say it, but on the other hand, we're seeing it proven again and again in labs by people like Dean Radin, Daryl Bem, Russell Targ, Hal Puthoff. A lot of these people over the years have shown, just how powerful the human mind and the power of the superconscious can be.
You can actually take out of thin air information about something you have absolutely no access to, just using your mind.
But why couldn't I do that by looking at a map and trying to change the course of a hurricane if a person's mind was that attuned to it? I don't know what the differences are.
Well, that was Ted Owens' main claim. In fact, he asked that someday we name it after him, the Owens effect, being that it's just as easy to manipulate large-scale phenomena like hurricanes as it is to deal with the sort of microscopic phenomenon often shown in the parapsychology laboratory.
Yeah, this goes back to that saying from Yoda. In Empire Strikes Back, I always think back on Luke trying to lift the X-Wing out of the swamp. Luke says, it's just too difficult, it's too big. And Yoda, I'll paraphrase, says something like, well, that's just because you think it's too big. You think that it's too hard, and that's why you fail.
Always with you what cannot be done.
Let's take a look at one last excerpt from our upcoming documentary. We'll be featuring more excerpts in future episodes, and you can go to our crowdfunding page as well as Lance's YouTube page, both linked below, to find even more material there.
It's February 5th, 1976, Palo Alto, California. All over the city, residents look up to the sky and witness something extraordinary.
He said, well, I'm going to create a snowstorm of the like that you've never seen there in Northern California, and it's going to snow like hell over this next weekend, and it'll be published in your newspaper, your local newspaper. There'll be such a big snowstorm that the papers will write about it because there's been nothing like there for 50 years.
January 25th, 1976. To the scientists I know, gentlemen, it is time to give you a demonstration, to strike fear into your hearts. I am not your ordinary, orthodox human.
Inside the labs of Stanford Research Institute, two of the CIA's top scientists, Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, watch, stunned.
I've been in California now for 62 years, and the only snowstorm that I can recall ever happening is the one that was sent to us by Ted Owens.
Although it was not known why we were doing it, but it's generally known in the public that we're looking for people to come forward with examples of paranormal experiences. We were contacted by Ted Owens, who said that he had a lifetime of really remarkable experiences.
It brings all of these disparate interests together, and I think a lot of people share those interests and are going to really get behind this and hopefully share the excitement that we both have for this documentary. And I would just encourage people, if you can, go to the crowdfunding website that will be linked below this video. And there's going to be a lot of things that, if you can help contribute to this project, that we also can contribute to your understanding of it and to be a participant with us in it. We're going to be doing behind the scenes videos as we make the documentary, and you'll get access to that. We're going to be providing, for instance, say, course that Ted Owens himself taught in, what would you call it, Jeffrey? Self-awareness? In learning psychokinesis?
There are many different ways to couch what Ted Owens taught. I took his training program myself, and at the time he asked me, what do you want to do with this kind of power? And I said to him, well, I have no interest in controlling hurricanes or causing UFOs to manifest the way you do. But what I'd like to do is to become a spokesperson to the world at large about the realities of psychic phenomena and esoteric ways of looking at the world. And within about 6 months of taking the Ted Owens training program, we launched the original Thinking Aloud television series. And so I've been doing that. I've been fulfilling that dream almost ever since. And I think what it's really about, ultimately, is becoming the best version of yourself.
Our tagline for my company, Waking Universe Films, is I'm another version of you. And it's all about the idea of human potential and how we are all reflections of that same potential. And that really is the theme that we want to get out of this whole story, is what truly is possible if we can just imagine it.
And I'm very excited now, many, many decades later, that we're at a point where we can tell the story to a large audience.
Mine is perhaps the greatest story in the entire history of the world.
He called himself the PK Man.
Lightning is my specialty.